You know, one of the greatest and strongest ties that the United States has ever built across the globe is with our treaty allies and partners. And we have to, if we want to be taken seriously in a foreign policy space, continue to work with our foreign allies, partners, and support them. And also, we have to maintain a sense of trueness and not act as hypocrites in the global space. Korea, nuclear weapons, and the future of foreign policy. Let's get into it. Hello there, and welcome in to a brand new episode of the End of the Week, a national security and international relations news and review podcast. It's me, your friend, Morgan Huston, aka Whiskey Mo, in a different shirt than the intro. Yay! I recorded the intro and was hopefully this part this morning, as I had a lot of stuff going on on the day I normally record. So I was trying to be efficient, and as I was walking out to the car this morning to go to my job, I spilled coffee all down the front of that shirt. You probably would not have noticed it, but I feel that you deserve professionalism, and a new shirt is professionalism. So thank you for joining us in this fantastic episode. I'm really excited to talk about North Korea, South Korea, international relationships, alliances, maybe a little bit of history of U.S. Korean relations. As always, it's a blast. Thank you for being here. One of the things that I have thoroughly enjoyed in this during this podcast is finding ways to communicate some of the more esoteric ideas of national defense and international relations to a regular audience. And I hope that you are finding some value to this. And if you do, I would ask you if you would please support me. You can go ahead and click the link right there, www.patreon.com/whiskeymo. For $5 a month, you can get every one of these episodes a day early. Anything I post national defense and security wise, or anything I post on the Whiskey Mo channel in general, you'll get early. Also, eventually there will be other perks. I'm working on a few stickers, maybe a hat. I don't know. I'm thinking about like this upside down Mesa, maybe an upside down NatSec nerd hat. I don't know. So NatSec nerds, if you would like. As always, if your support is enough, if you give this a like, a subscribe, that is all I ever ask. So today, a brief discussion of what we're going to do is we're going to talk briefly about the history of U.S. relations with the Korean Peninsula, how we got here, what has caused this discussion, and maybe a couple of ideas of why this is important and maybe a path forward. As I am not a Korea expert, I can only give the broad strokes. But I do believe that what we are seeing right now with some of the actions taken by the current administration are just kind of standard practice, and I think they are troubling, and there are things that we definitely need to talk about. So stick around, and let's get to it. All right, a brief history of the Korean-U.S. relations. I talk about it briefly, and I'm going to try and put a card up here. A link to, actually, I don't know if I can, but I will definitely put a link to the show down below in the show notes. I talk about Air Force Special Warfare operations during the Korean War on an episode of a podcast that I was a guest on called One's Ready, which is a podcast dedicated to the support and training of potential Air Force Special Warfare operators. Peaches, Aaron, and Trent are wonderful humans. They were kind enough to have me on twice to talk about the history of Air Force Special Warfare. And I will link to that episode if you would like to watch it. But one of the main catalysts for the long-standing relationship between the United States and Korea was the Korean War, the invasion of South Korea by a communist North Korea with the support of the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP and China itself had become much more aggressive in certain aspects when it came to support the communist movements in Asia after the Cultural Revolution and the movements that led to the expelling of the democratic forces to Taiwan. And as forces of the Kim family and the communist North began to progress south, eventually a UN task force moved forward under the command of U.S. forces. I believe it was General MacArthur. This was a hellacious war that was back and forth. Many movies and shows surrounding Vietnam in the early 80s make reference to people who had fought. One of my personal favorites is Heartbreak Ridge, where Clint Eastwood's character plays an aging gunnery sergeant who takes a recon platoon, and then they end up eventually as part of the invasion of Grenada, and he is a Medal of Honor recipient for Heartbreak Ridge in Korea. But at one point, the communist forces had pushed the UN and South Korean forces all the way to a ring around Pusan in the southeast portion of the peninsula, and eventually led to retaking all the way up to the 38th parallel, which is kind of where the status quo ante is today. The Korean War technically has never ended. The end of fighting came about from an armistice being signed. There is a demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas that is surrounded by a line of demarcation, mines, massive planning when it comes to fires, to schemes of maneuver. There is one area that is patrolled by North Koreans, South Koreans, and U.S. personnel where there are meetings, and it's fairly famous. I'll try to put a picture up here now about I believe it's the Joint Protection Area or something to that effect. I never served in Korea. I do find it fascinating, though. But this led to the creation of the long-term 70-year alliance between South Korea and the U.S. At times, this was problematic. The South Korean government hasn't always been democratic per se. It has been at times a military dictatorship. Over the last, I believe, 25 years plus, it has definitely moved to a more democratic system of government. But it is a highly militarized society. There is conscription. Most men have to serve. They are a highly capable military. The United States has a massive footprint on the Korean Peninsula. Used to be broader. There used to be camps and air bases scattered throughout the peninsula, some right on the DMZ. Now they are generally centered around Seoul and Busan down in the south. So there is a long-standing commitment to the protection of South Korea from North Korea. And the U.S. has generally been the head of the military, essentially the military operations in Korea, through the guise of the UN command that is placed on top. And the U.S. Forces Korea commander is the head of the UN command, which will command all forces on the peninsula if and when a North Korean invasion were to happen. So that is a brief history. It's fully integrated, and this is where some of the things we'll see later where it becomes an issue. The South Korean military is essentially almost dependent because of the full integration of American forces within the Korean Peninsula, up into planning missions. It is a audacious thing. I don't have the expertise to talk about it. I highly recommend doing a little bit of research. There's going to be a lot of links that are talking about the current event stuff, but I highly recommend you finding some books to read about one of my personal favorites is one that was published on the 50th anniversary of the Korean War, and it's a history of combat search and rescue in Korea. It's phenomenal. My great Tio is in there. His talk about some of his rescues as a flight medic in the Korean, in some of the first helicopter rescues. It's a phenomenal story. But yes, please go and take a look on the history of the Korean War. It's one that is not talked about nearly as much. It was one of the most instrumental, in my opinion, instrumental conflicts that was fought by U.S. forces post World War II. It set the stage for a lot of advancements in the military age. Some of the first serious use of jet aircraft, some uses of infantry tactics. We saw a lot of advancements that led into some of the successes that eventually came in Vietnam, even though you can't really call that as a success. But I think it's really important for us to understand our past, so I highly recommend it. Next up, let's talk about what has caused my sudden interest in what is happening on the Korean Peninsula. Earlier this week, President Trump, just hours before a set of joint military exercises between the South Koreans and the Americans was set to start, directed Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth to dramatically reduce the amount of participating troops from the U.S. He did recognize in his Truth Social post that it would be nearly impossible to completely stop the war games because of just the speed, but at the same time, the drastically reduced. He stated that the main reason for this is that he saw this as being too aggressive against North Korea, that he has a great working relationship with Kim Jong-un, that the North Koreans haven't been aggressive or any of those things. And it has caused a little bit of an issue because there is these things are not easily stopped. You're talking about like essentially an aircraft carrier trying to turn or trying to stop. You don't stop those things on a dime. Same things with this. We're talking about months and months and months of planning, of troop movements, of preparing for these things. So I think one of the things, this is one, it's just irresponsible. It makes things really difficult to attach. We really need to be standing by our allies and partners. We make commitments, and one of the things in his Truth Social post that Donald Trump makes reference to is the fact that South Koreans did not want to support the current military operations that are taking place against Iran. And I think what this does is this demonstrates some of the miscalculations that the current administration has when it comes to negotiating or just honoring previous agreements between nations. Not everything is purely transactional. We've talked about this before on this channel. One of the things that we have to understand is that we may have made promises to nations in that we will do certain actions so that they will not conduct actions. If we as Americans decide to completely withdraw from the Korean Peninsula, there is really no incentive for the South Koreans to not seek out things like nuclear weapons or other kind of programs which could be inherently destabilizing to the region. We already have one, if not more, destabilizing actors within the region because North Korea, despite what the president says, is not a stable nation. We have no idea what is going to happen. There's no idea of what the inner workings. And in a hypocritical stance, North Korea has nuclear weapons. They are confirmed to have nuclear weapons. We are currently at war with a nation to prevent them from acquiring nuclear weapons when all intelligence seems to have pointed out that they were nowhere close. Yet North Korea has them. They have them, and now we are withdrawing and pulling back from our treaty commitments. It's just hypocritical. It just seems we're talking out of both sides of our mouths. We want our cake and eat it too, and we just can't do it. And I think that this is problematic. And what this does is, at a minimum, it shows our South Korean allies that we may not be fully committed, and we may not come to the aid as we have promised them. It also then you can just continue to expand that circle out within South Asia. Are we going to be truly committed to our allies and partners when the time comes? Our Five Eyes, some of our Five Eye allies, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, who we forced a pacifistic constitution on them so that they would not rebuild a military to stifle their imperialistic urges. And now they're part of the reason that they are trying to creatively rebuild a military even under the prohibition of a pacifist constitution is because there's doubts of the ability of the Americans to uphold their treaty commitments. The reason, and I think that there is a valid discussion to be had that Donald Trump has started about our allies and partners upholding a higher percentage of their own defense. The thing is that we have created this situation. And I think the lack of a working knowledge of history demonstrates this. We cannot expect our allies and partners to all of a sudden on a dime to have a perfect ready-to-go defense base. They have relied on us because we have created this situation. The only reason that we have partners in NATO and across the globe who have not as invested as strongly in defense is because we have provided that shield, and we have asked them to let us provide that shield. Right now, if we want them to become more capable and have the ability to defend themselves and less reliance on the United States, I don't think that is inherently bad. But I think that we also need to work with them and make sure that we can get them to where they need to go, and still at the same time make them understand that we are still going to uphold our treaty commitments to them. That is, I think, the most upsetting aspect of this, is that as someone who claims to be a businessman and that you should honor your word as a businessman, which we have seen that he doesn't, we as a nation, especially if we are supposed to be that one shining city on a hill, as many Republicans like to aspire back to in the past, that talk about being the shining example and city on a hill, where we set up and shine the light of democracy across the globe. Part of that also includes upholding our treaty agreements and our promises that we have made. And I think that this is why this is so upsetting. This is just a continuation of some of the discussions around the desire to withdraw from NATO because we are not getting something out of it. We're getting a stable world. Like, that is, like, living and operating as a nation, as a state, as an economy in a stable world benefits the United States. It benefits its citizens. It benefits our businesses. But the fact that this is destabilizing the world, the war in Iran right now, I just looked out as I was driving home from work today, gas prices are up 40 cents, right? That is nearly I think that's $4 to $4.40. That's a fairly significant rise. I can't do the math because I'm not a math guy, but these are the things that are so upsetting and disquieting, is the fact that there doesn't seem to be a recognition within the administration of the second and third order effects of the decisions that are being made on an international scale, regardless of the desires of the Republican Party and the right wing of American society to be a more isolationist and non-globalist part of the world. That is the reality. The decisions that the Americans make, especially in the scope of international relations, have trickle effects and ripple effects across the globe. We are the world superpower. We are the most powerful economy in the globe. Everything that we do has impact on the globe, which can go around and come back to bite us in the ass. We have to have sober and long-term thought when we make decisions. We cannot be basing it off the feelings of an angry man because he feels slighted because a nation didn't decide to come to aid of a war that they weren't warned about or asked to participate only now, 6 months later. And I think this is where I'm getting so frustrated, because the Koreans have been a wonderful partner and ally to us. They sent troops as part of the global war on terrorism. I know that they were in Korea. I cannot remember if they were not Korea. Sorry, they were in Afghanistan. I don't know if they were in Iraq. I think they were, but like and this is again goes back to the frustration that I have with the talk about NATO and the fact that there's this constant ask about what are we getting out of it. And I think, yes, numbers-wise, the United States generally suffers more when it comes to fatalities, to casualties, but that should be the case. These are wars that we have started, or they are wars that were against us, and our allies have come to our support. And you think about it, some of the technologies that have been designed and have been implemented that are utilized in America. Samsung is a Korean company, right? And they are integral to so much. I am literally looking at 2 Samsung monitors. My TV is Samsung. Sony is a Japanese company, right? This is how I'm getting my video. Like, these are integral parts of our economy, and like, we just don't seem to understand it as an administration right now. And this is all tied in. There's no such thing as independent national security decisions. Everything that we do, politics are together. National security, food policy, international relations, trade agreements, all of these things are tied in together. And if we show ourselves as an unreliable partner in one of these aspects, there are ripple effects that'll show, and it weakens the American system. And the fact that we have had an American century so far seems to be going away because of the decisions that are being made. And I don't like that. Like, I am, generally speaking, not a fan of the American hegemony. Like, I do believe that America has some imperialistic things that we need to address, because we are not always living up to the standard that we espouse. But that doesn't mean that we can't do better. And right now we're not. We're not. And I would be this hypercritical. I'm hypercritical of the Biden administration on some of these things too, when it comes to things like Israel or the Afghanistan pullout. Like, this is not just because it's a party that I don't vote for. These are national security issues that we are making worse by these decisions. And so that was a very long rant on why I think this is so problematic and such a problem. And I think that we should honor our commitments. And like, there's ways to do this too. I think, like, right now we are having issues with shipbuilding. We could easily offset some of our troubles with naval shipbuilding by maybe contracting to a South Korean partner. Like, they have been building ships very successfully, and we could probably leverage that if we wanted to. Now, I know that's a little bit outside of the box thinking, but it's a possibility. It's a thought process. But like, these are the kinds of things that we're going to have to start doing to rebuild the trust that we have lost over the last really decades since 2016. There's a little bit of history of Korea-U.S. relations and the Korean War, what is happening, and some of my thoughts on it. As always, I would love to know what you think. Get down in those comments. Tell me what you think. Should the U.S. pull out from Korea entirely? Should we reinforce? Should we build bigger? Should we continue the status quo? What do you think? What's your opinion? Do you think I'm completely off base? Do you think that there are individualistic national security things that we can do that don't affect other things? Or are we as interconnected, or are we somewhere in between? Would love to hear from you. As always, if you found value in this, please gently caress that like button. Lets the world know that you enjoyed it, that someone like you would also enjoy it. Go ahead and subscribe. It's free. It's free. And it really shows the algorithm that there is value in this platform, and that you learn something, and that we can engage in sophisticated repartee about the state of the globe. If you want to know when videos are dropped, you can go ahead and hit the notification bell. That will let you know when any new video from my channel drops. And, as always, if you really feel so inclined, you can go ahead and subscribe to the Patreon, where you'll get this episode a day early. So that would be the 21st of August for this one, as this normally will come out to everyone on other platforms on the 22nd. But I really appreciate it. This one was really interesting for me because I am trying to become more sophisticated in understanding of the Asian impacts of American national security. I'm finding it fascinating, and I really wanted to go to Korea before I got out, but I just didn't get the opportunity. So thank you so much again for sticking with me, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I will see you again at the end of the week.